All right, well, let's get this thing going. Hey guys, this is Bernie Keefe. I'm a fishing guide up in Granby. I target lake trout 95% of my life. We're getting ready to start ice fishing here. Some of the lakes are already going. Our Granby is not yet. We'll talk about that in a minute. There's all the information. If you have any questions, any ideas of stuff you want me to do videos on or anything like that, just let me know. And if you guys have questions on here, type them out and we'll try to get them all answered. So the Facebook's Fishing with Bernie, Instagram's Fishing with Bernie, website's Fishing with Bernie. Pretty simple. So we're going to talk about ice fishing for lake trout today, trophies or eaters. I believe that you should target one or the other when you're coming around, especially in Colorado lakes. Anywhere I go, I tend to target one or the other. They have different habits, and if you if you target either big or little, you have better chances on catching more of each. Now the gear I like to use, the rods are all dependent on weight. On half ounce and lighter than Dave Ginn's split grips, medium heavy, those are great rods. They can handle big fish, but they really handle a lighter jig really well. And if you go to the 3/4, and I use up to ounce and a half jigs, either the Dave Ginn's 40-inch heavy or the Jason Mitchell Elite Series 45-inch, those are great rods for the heavy jigs. Fluger Presidents 25 and 30 series reels. Those things, those drags have not failed me yet. They're very durable reels. They put up with an entire winter of me banging them around on the snowmobiles. And then your line, I'm a 10 and 12 pound test guy. If you're chasing real big fish, you might want to go a little heavier, but 12 seems to do it for me, even when we go out to like Flaming Gorge or we get down to Blue Mesa for them real fat ones. But what I discourage people from doing is using light line. These fish will fight themselves to death. They're fighting for their lives and they will fight themselves to death. And then you have a problem. For jig heads, super sharp. And I make mine in fine and heavy wire. I use trocar hooks. Now, the fine wire hooks, if you're using them, you need to set your drag so the hook won't bend. So you'll be fishing with a pretty loose drag. When that fish gets all crazy at the hole, then that's where they tend to bend your hooks right at the hole. But they do penetrate better. Now, the heavy wire hooks, they're not going to bend. You're not going to get nothing out of them. You just got to make sure you reef on the hook set and set your drag for your line. Um, and if you guys have any questions, just please type them in. I went to the wrong way. We'll get to them. Then sonars, flashers versus traditional sonar. That's a level of what you're comfortable with. I like them both. Flashers are really nice because they tell you what's happening right now immediately, but they don't show history. So if you look up on the mountain and you're looking for elk or you see something across the lake and a fish swims by, you didn't see it. You don't know, don't even know that you can do something to try to get it back. Traditional sonar, you have the history on it and you have GPSs, which with today's maps, I think that is extremely important. Even if you're using a flasher, you should still have a traditional sonar with you just for the GPS, and you can download the maps on it. Navionics has their stuff. Lowrance has their stuff. It's all good. Find the map that works best for you. And if you're out there in the summertime, you can make your maps with Navionics. They make excellent maps. So give them a shot when you're looking at it. Then augers, electric versus gas. I'm a big fan of the electric augers out there nowadays. I can see the gas augers becoming very much a minority here in the lower part of the ice belt. Once you get up into Canada and stuff like that, when you need the extensions and you need the 10-inch augers, that might change it. They'll probably keep the gas around up there forever. But here in Colorado, the lower end of the ice belt, it's hard to beat electric. No gas smell. You don't have to worry about spilling. You just plug it in and go. So that's what I got there. So structure, you got to know it and understand what you're fishing on. Lake trout, I've said it for years. If you just picture a room with a view, you like that upstairs room, you like a big window out in front of you. You want the fridge would be the couch, would be the salmon or the bait fish swimming by, and they want to be swimming by a soft spot on that hump. And so you picture a big hump that drops off into deep water. Park yourself right on the edge of that hump, work up and down it maybe, because those fish will run out in that deep water. They'll grab a salmon, a rainbow, a whitefish, whatever your bait is. Then they're going to go back and rest and eat the fish. And that's kind of the couch. And when it comes to it, the humps I always look at, they will go down into the depth of the lake. They'll go down in the deepest part of the basin. Those are my favorite ones, the ones closest to that basin. I'll cut the hump in half and I'll fish the deepest side, the part that rolls off into the deepest side first. And after the lake gets a lot of pressure, then I'll move to the back side of the hump, because the fish will realize maybe like 3 weeks into the season that there's safety on the backside of those humps and nobody will be back there, so you can go in there and you can catch them. They'll be a little bit dumber over there than they were the week before they moved over there. Saddles are always good. Them fish migrate through them like an elk would migrate through a saddle on the hill. They'll rest in them, and that's another place they'll go, especially when there's pressure on the humps. They'll move into those saddles. Always take a look at them. 1 or 2 holes, 5-10 minutes will tell you all you need to know. Then ridges, they have it all. They have humps, they have saddles, they have flats, they have everything you can do. So if you're walking out, or you have a group and you can't be super mobile and bounce around all the lake, you can pick a long ridge and you can just pick the humps apart on it. You can pick the saddles, you can find those little flats, fish all the inside turns on it. There'll be fish up there, and there'll be some big ones up there. You just got to kind of connect with them. It's a lot of work, but if you're kind of not mobile, they can do it all. In flats, I just picture a big hay meadow when I picture a flat. Flattest part of the lake, drops off super slow. There's always fish on flats, and there's always some big fish. The bait fish are going to be following the plankton. The plankton's going to be going with the current wherever the currents are moving that day. The big fish are going to be following the bait fish. So you can sit on a flat in one spot all day and they might cruise by, or you could do what we do and we just bounce around them. There's really no rhyme or reason to it. Just go out there and start drilling and start bouncing around. You'll connect in some fish. And if it's a real nasty day and you don't really want to get out of your tent, sit still. You'll have some coming by you. They cruise the whole flat, and it's just a matter of how many times they're going to cruise by you. And then any of those just plain cool edges, if you get anywhere that drops off the top of something, say is 20 to 50 feet, and it drops off 20 or 30 more feet to something else, on top of that, there's going to be fish using that. Good place to check every time you go out. And that's where you find the little hidden gold mines. You find those spots there, not a lot of people fish them, and those are some of my favorite spots to fish, because not a lot of people fish them. The fish will generally be a little more aggressive, and you just can't go wrong with it. If you guys have any questions, please ask us, because I don't think we're getting any. And oh, okay. I can find average lake trout, no problem. Where do I find the big girls? The big fish are going to be staying away from the average ones. When you're looking for those, you're not looking for numbers. And these humps, these saddles, these ridges, the flats, they all will have them bigger fish. And it's a matter of using your techniques and your lures to get them to bite. Because you got to understand, a lot of these 35, 40-inch fish are 40, 50 years old. So they're not going to fall for the same stuff a 20-inch fish will fall for. It's kind of like when you were 20, you fell for a lot of crap, and now that you're up in your 40 and 50, you look back and you go, what the heck was I thinking? Well, that's what these guys do too. So when you're looking for those large fish, dissect those humps, those saddles, look at structure, and if you're on a new lake or you're just trying to learn a lake, get that map out and keep hitting what looks like good spots. If you're in like say salmon. If I'm on a salmon lake, I know I won't be fishing any deeper than 80 or 90 feet, and I can be fishing as shallow as 3 or 4. And I'll get into that in a minute when it comes to what the bait fish are in the lake, and when you can look at that and help decide what depth you're fishing, because that's probably one of the most important things to look at. How's the water level at Granby this year? Granby's about 15 feet low, and it's dropping. I would expect it to drop about 5 feet a month until runoff. The ice is, it was starting to form, and last night we had a bunch of snow. Today we had a bunch of snow, and we had 20 plus mile an hour winds. I'm going to take a drive tomorrow, and I'll put it on my Facebook page, and so we'll see how much of the lake opened up and how much of it just got snow covered. Hopefully it all opened up so the ice won't be dangerous. Are you going to show what these look like on a topo? Oh, I didn't bring a topo with me. I'll tell you what, send me a message on Facebook and I will do videos of that tomorrow. Will that work for you? Rocky, muddy, or sandy areas. I'm a big fan that lake trout will hunt in rocky areas. They'll digest their food in muddy areas, and they'll sit on sand also, but it's got to be comfortable because they'll lay their bellies right in that mud, and they're just like us. They want it to be comfortable. They want it to be nice and soft. So I prefer muddy if I'm fishing for fish that aren't real active and aggressive. And if I think I know a place where they're going to come up and hunt rainbows or suckers or salmon, then I'm going to look for rocky areas, and they'll be if you get them in the rocky areas, they'll be very aggressive, and you'll just see it on your graphs. What's the best way to find features without fancy depth gauges? Any specific maps with depth maps? Here in Colorado, there's a map company out there called Fish and Map Company. They make a great topo map. It's 10-foot contours. They're extremely accurate. And then from there, if you're outside of Colorado, I think you just got to go to your local tackle shops and see if there's anything out there. We're fortunate that we've had people build them out here, but I know you get north up into Canada. And the one thing you can use is you can get on your computer and look at Google Earth and go back and forth when them lakes drop for a drought or something. You might see something. You might be able to pick up little hints. I know we found spots on Clearwater Lake that we wanted to fish, and we didn't have a map of it, but it was so clear we were able to find our spots on Google Earth. So that's another opportunity for you. Does time of day make a difference on what structure you pick? No, it really doesn't. I do believe that lake trout don't feed very much at night, so the morning time is always the best, and then the afternoon can drop off, and then there's another minor bite in the evening. But one of the big things I've learned is if you can stumble into at noon, 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, any time of day, you stumble into a group of fish that haven't been harassed in the past few days, you're going to get bit. It's absolutely crazy how these fish, if they react to being fished for, they react to pressure so much. So if you can find them that haven't been pressured, then you're going to get bit. You can have a really good day on getting 2 or 3 fish in one spot. And I don't know about you guys, but if I get 2 or 3 large fish in a day, that just makes my day real happy. When fishing for big lakers that feed on salmon and rainbows, what jigging techniques would you recommend? Well, if I'm going to get to that in just a minute. I got a slide about that in just a minute. How long do you wait in a spot if you don't see fish? I am extremely ADD on that lake. If I'm not seeing fish, I'm known to move every 3 or 4 minutes. we'll start ice trolling out there and we'll start moving around. And once I start ice trolling, I'll just keep moving people till we see fish. And then once we see fish, then we slow down. Then we try to figure out what it takes to trigger them. But if you're on some of these bigger spots out on these lakes, you can miss these fish by 50 yards if you're sitting still. So for me, it pays to move. Can we listen to this on a later date? Yes, I think it will be saved on Navionics site. Kurt, do you have an answer for that? I think
Yes,
we can. Oh,
yeah,
go
it's
ahead.
being recorded, and then we'll upload it to YouTube on the Navionics YouTube channel.
Perfect. There we go. What time do you stop fishing shallow? Do you fish more than one lure bait close to each other? I have caught some of my biggest fish I've caught at 11, 12 o'clock. So I don't quit fishing shallow at a certain time. I bounce into the shallows. If you're fishing shallow, say less than 10 feet of water, those fish are super aggressive. Super aggressive. Use really big baits. I only use one pole because if you drill a hole within 30 seconds, if there's a fish there, he should come over and bite. That's where I use the real big baits, like them big hoagies. I'll tie up some fur and feathers into really big stuff, big sassy shad, stuff like that. um, Jerk shads. I'll use a 7-inch Berkeley gulp jerk shads, just real big and fishing pretty aggressively. But no, I don't. I will only fish one lure and I'll keep it moving. And I'll be very impatient in shallows. If I would sit down and eat a sandwich, that would be way longer than I'd normally stay on the shallow. We run into the bank, we'll hit a spot, a little hump, a little point, and if they're not there in a minute or two, we're back out chasing fish because them fish, they'll be cruising the shoreline, and there's always one or two cruising the shoreline, but trying to connect with that fish is a big challenge. From New Hampshire, baits we have available are shiners, smelt, and suckers. We are allowed 2 lines. What would be your tip up bait? I don't use tip ups, and unless you're using a quick strike rig, we kind of got to be careful with those because you don't want them big fish to swallow it. But if I was to use a tip up, I would go more the either one of those three, as long as it's a good oily fish. That seems to what they like, and I like sucker meat on tipping with my jigs, so I would tend to go to that just out of habit. What do you consider shallow after that last question, and what do you consider deep? Shallow, we caught a 43-inch fish in less than 30 inches of water, so that's shallow. And then deep, I don't like fishing pretty much over 60 feet. You can go catch big fish out in that deep water. It just becomes inefficient the way I fish and the way I move around so much. So I try to stay under 60, and shallow, it doesn't matter as long as that fish can swim around. The shallower you're going to fish, the more aggressive those fish are going to be because your bait fish, when they see a lake trout, they're going to run up and hide under and wedge themselves in between the ice and the bank. And the big fish know that, so they see something, they're not going to look at it very long, they're just going to run in and hit it. It's a pretty cool bite, and I've had clients get their rods yanked out of their hands in that shallow water they hit so hard. You tip sucker for big fish? I will, yes. I don't do anything all the time, but I always have sucker meat with me. And if the fish are coming in and looking and acting like they're going to bite, but they're not biting, then I will throw a piece of sucker meat on it. And I make sure it's real small. It's cut real thin. I'll cut the most of the meat off the fillet. It's never wider than the tube, and it's never longer than the tail. It's just an extension of the jig. It does not interact. It does not affect the action of the jig. So go to that one. Okay, thoughts on lakes. Now, I know a lot of you guys are not coming from Colorado, so you got to kind of think about what your bait fish is. Out here in Colorado, we have kokanee salmon and rainbow. The Lakers will eat browns and suckers also, but the big connections I look for are kokanee and rainbow. So if you're look up your stocking reports, look up what is in the lake, and then migrate to that. Find out about the bait. If you can find out about the bait, like kokanee, they're pelagic, they live out in the depths. If you have a good kokanee lake, you're going to have a lot of fish living in deeper water, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 feet. Out of the gorge, 70 feet is shallow, Flaming Gorge. So if you have a lot of those kokanee, you're going to be looking in deeper water. Now, if you have lakes that we don't have kokanee in, and it's all rainbows, browns, brookies, suckers, all those fish are shallow running fish. You'll fish for them shallow. So those, your bigger fish, are going to be in where the rainbows and browns live, in water less than 15 feet. So you go to those lakes, I wouldn't even think about fishing deep water out there. There's no reason for them to be there. Now, if you have different varieties of rainbows, those can be pelagic and they can live out there. So you got to kind of learn what's in your lake, and that'll really tell what's going on. Here in Colorado, Granby's kokanee population crashed. Blue Mesa has a healthy kokanee population. Twin is all rainbows. Williams Forks crashed, so that's all rainbows. Green Mountain doesn't have much in it all right now. Those fish are starving. They should be easy to catch. Turquoise, that's a rainbow lake. Rudeye has some kokanee, not a lot. Taylor is a rainbow lake. Grand Lake is a rainbow lake. Big Creek, Joe Wright, they're rainbows, but Joe Wright does have grayling, so that changes that. You got to think about where the grayling are going to be in the winter. So look at them stocking reports. Look at what's in your lake. Talk to you if you don't know anything else. Call your local biologist. He'll tell you what's in those lakes and where he gets them in his nets and where they should be, and that would be a really good hint of where you should be fishing for them big fish. And then lake trout, they eat rainbows, browns, and suckers shallow, kokanee deeper. That's kind of how that works. And then when I am fishing that, like I said, when I fish real shallow, I will fish real big and real aggressive. And then when I move out in the deeper water, I mellow out a little bit. You got to think those fish in the deeper water, they have time to come and look at your jig. We've had them look at our jig and dance up and down for 10, 15, 20 minutes before they bite. And that'll get your heart going every time, but that does happen. Any tips on turquoise? Hey, Dave, I would fish turquoise real shallow. I would look for them on the far side of the lake from where you can park. There's some structure over there. And if I don't know how much turquoise is fluctuating this year, but if you can get that stuff in less than 15 foot of water, that always looked really good to me. It's been a long time since I've been up there, though. Colors. I'm a big believer in color. It just seems that over the past years, you'll drop down, let's say, a brown jig, and you won't be seeing anybody, and the next guy has a olive one on, and he'll be seeing fish consistently. Then we'll switch one guy off to an olive, and he'll be on it. And it's really crazy. I don't understand how in, say, 50 feet of water, the lake is covered with ice, covered with snow. It's a slushy mess. There's like no penetration out there. But yet these colors do make a difference for us. Fish will come in and look. So if you're in an area that you really think you're going to see fish, and you're not, that's where I start changing lures. I'll change colors, I'll change shapes, I'll go longer, I'll go shorter, I'll go from a tube to a jerk shad. I'll drop stuff like that down there because those fish are coming around and they know what's going on and they can see it from a little distance. So if they don't like what they see, they're not going to come and look at it, and you're not going to have any idea they were there. So I break mine down into basically two categories. I have natural colors and I have them brilliant wild colors. I use natural colors 95% of the time, But every once in a while, a couple years ago, that just glow tubes, that was a big ticket for us, and we caught a lot of big fish on them. And I walked away from that season thinking I didn't know anything anymore, because up until that year I did not like glow. So there's something I've paid attention to a lot over the years, and we were talking about it in the boat this summer. If you're out there drilling holes, and you drill holes, let's say you're fishing a flat and you're drilling holes, you hop on your snowmobile and you drive 25 seconds, and you're bouncing around like that, covering big chunks of ground in between there. There's a really good chance you're going to miss that big fat lazy fish, because you get a 25, 30 pound fish, 35-pound fish, and he's out there on a piece of structure. He can swim around down there, and he's going to make a decision long before he gets there. He's going to feel your jig on his lateral line. He's going to feel that, say, 50 feet out, and he's going to decide whether that's worth the energy to go swim for it. So if you shrink up your holes and drill them a little closer together, you might find you catch a couple more big fish, but you're going to be covering, if there's no fish in the area, then you're going to be covering a lot of fishless ground, if that makes any sense. So I will always take the gamble in certain spots and drill holes pretty close together, and hoping that one of them fish will come up that we're going to catch in that little run. It's going to be just a complete monster. I don't know how many times over the years we've been just ice trolling and drilling holes. It's in a straight line down a flat, and a guy skips over a hole, and I'm like, oh no, I drilled it, you got to fish it. And somebody walks in there and catches a really nice fish. And it just goes to prove that don't skip over too much ground when you're fishing. Moving around is good, but don't make too many um, big real estate changes, or go back and fish, or do something. But I like to fish a lot pretty close together. Now, what part of Granby do I typically fish? You haven't had much luck off Sunset Point and Rainbow. We have machines, and I'll fish the whole lake. You'll see me start off maybe on Sunset Point, and then I'll run over to Deer. I'll go back in the back of Arapahoe Bay. We'll come back and fish Columbine Bay, maybe in front of the pump house. We literally fish the over half of the lake on every day I'm out there. And by the end of the week, there's not much on the lake I haven't fished, just because I believe in moving around and trying to find fish that haven't been harassed. So when I'm out 65 feet, do I fish the whole water column, or do I stay on the bottom? That we will be watching the graph, and if we see anything that indicates there's fish suspending out there, we will fish the whole water column. And more times than not, when I have guys reel up, I tell them, don't, when we're getting ready to move, don't reel fast. Take your time, take it nice and slow coming up. And that way, if there's anything cruising around out there, we'll know. And then if we start seeing them suspended out there, then we'll fish that suspended bite. Because when you get into that suspended bite, any fish cruising off the bottom, he's looking to eat. And so he's a little more aggressive. He's not as bright and not as careful as another fish. So those are very catchable fish when you get them off of the bottom. When ice trolling, how far apart do I drill my holes? Probably in the morning when I'm really fresh, I might run out, say 20, 25 paces. And then toward the afternoon, and I'll be having big strides with that. And the afternoon, after I've been running around all day, I know my holes shrink a little bit. So it might be down to, if I was doing them at 50 feet, now it's going to be down to about 40, maybe something like that. You just got to find out what's good for you. I would start with 30 to 50 feet. One thing you can always think of, if you're fishing with your friends and you guys are fishing large fish, you want to fish far enough apart from each other so you're not competing for the same fish, but close enough to each other that you can give each other grief, because having fun out there with your friends is what you're really out there for. So kind of mix that up and keep moving and see how that works for you. What are you recommending for sonars? I'm a big fan of the Lowrance unit. I think they're awesome. If you want to, because they have the GPS, the new Live 7 units, HDS Live, I'm running 7s on my machines this year. Those are fast. You can keep up with things. You got the GPS. And if you're running a flasher, I don't think you can get a better flasher out there than the Vexilar. Whatever you do, you want to get something with a bottom zoom, because you are zooming in on the bottom a lot. And if they're suspending, you want to be able to zoom in on where they're suspending, because that'll give you a lot of hints on how those fish are acting. So bait sensor, plain Jane. This is we had a question about this earlier. Things you're asking when you're tipping your jigs with bait or scent, or if you're not tipping it, will bait or scent it help entice the strike? I think it will. I'm a big believer that if you put something on there that makes it smell good, I know when I walk in the house and my wife is cooking dinner, I automatically want to eat, because this house smells really, really good. Will they bite it harder? They might not bite it harder, but they will hold on to it a split second longer. And at the end of the day, if you can get a split second longer of a bite on a lake trout, you win. That's a really good chance to stick them. But it all depends on their attitude. What do they want to deal with? Now, when I do deal with sucker meat, I scale it. I trim a lot of the meat off of it. I'll cut it into shapes. I'll shred the tail a little bit to give it a little action there. I will soak it in scents once in a while because it holds scents, but I will change it out a lot. I mean, I go through, if I'm bringing sucker out there with 2 guys, I will go through a whole fillet in a day, because I'm changing it out a lot. And then gulp works really good for a scent. Another scent that you can do is power bait. You can stick that in the tube. Anything that stinks, you can stick up inside the tube, and you just keep on squeezing the tube and rubbing it a little bit, and that stuff it'll work out in the water, and those are great scents. And if you do want to put scents into a Tupperware bowl, you can use cotton or cigarette butts, and you can soak them in there. Then you can use your tweezers to put them in and out of the tubes as you want to re-scent them. And then Velcro, if you're using big spoons, you can put a little piece of Velcro on the inside, that, not the hook, but the softer part, and you can scent them up, and that'll hold that scent in the spoons really well for you. You still got to scent it a lot, but it'll really hold on for you, and it won't affect the action of the lure at all. And the way you jig spoons, it'll stink up that water column really nice. If fishing is shallow point that gradually drops off to 40 feet, what depth would you target the big fish? I wouldn't worry about depth. I would look at that shallow point, and I would try to find the flattest part on it first. And I'd just fish all those flatter parts, working down on it. Just the flattest spots on it. The steeper drops, I wouldn't fish them at all. But anything that's a little gradual there, if you got an inside turn on the point, fish around that, but try to fish your flatter spots. That's where they'll be resting. And if you're shallow, it doesn't matter. Just fish shallow and fish aggressive, and I'd fish out on the front of the point for that. How would you fish with a permanent shack? One jig hole in the shack and one movable line? And I don't fish in a permanent shack, but if I was going to stay still all day long, I would still only use one rod. And the reason for that is lake trout bite so light and so fast. A lot of times, if you don't have that rod in your hand, you're going to miss them. So I like to have the rod in the hand. But tomorrow I'm going to put on my Facebook page, you can use wire strike indicators, but I'll put a video on the Facebook page on how I rig up a bobber to fish with these. And in the hut, it might be a pretty good thing if you're relaxing, because you'll get the bobber shaking and you can run over and grab your rod. And my summer fishing tactics similar to my ice tactics? Yes, definitely. Everything, they go hand in hand. The only difference is in the summertime you can go look for fish on your graph. In the wintertime, you just got to hope they're there and fish for them. I have a GPS, but the boss says she'll only buy me an FL28 or another sonar. What would you suggest, a Vex or like a Helix? Well, if you have the GPS, I would get the Vex. I mean, I'd really look at that Loran Sly HDS7 because you can move that back and forth to your boat if you get a boat. But if you're not going to do that, I'd get the Vex. Everybody I know has had great luck with those. What length do you believe is best to just return them to the water, grow big and old? You got to, that's a subject you should talk with your biologist about. I work closely with mine out here. I volunteer with him, and we talk about what he gets in the nets. Right now, on a lot of our lakes up here, there's a whole bunch of fish up to 18 inches. And then after 18 inches, those numbers drop off dramatically. So we pick on the fish under 18 inches. There's no use on killing 19 and 20-inch fish. If you have, I'll say if he got in his nets, 70% of the fish were 15 to 18 inches, but only 10% were over 20 inches. Well, might as well pick on the biggest group of fish, and them younger ones are better to eat anyway. These older fish and on our lakes have mercury in them, so you don't want to be messing with that. Do you think big fish have any problem with being on a piece of structure that is a high traffic sled area? No, not at all. I think they have a hard time with being pressured, but I don't think they really care about what's going on above them. They're used to being the biggest, baddest thing in the lake, and it don't care. It goes back to when you're fishing real shallow. If you get your auger out and you drill a hole and make all that noise, and somebody drops a jig down there before you're done drilling your second hole, if there's fish around there, that guy will be hooked up. So noise, I don't think that bothers them at all. Fishing pressure bothers them. What kind of scents do I use? I use a lot of gulp. I use a lot of power bait. I'll just get power bait and rub it on the tubes. Those are probably my biggest one, but the biggest thing I use more than anything else is just straight up sucker meat. It's hard to beat. It's hard to beat natural. Why do you want to give them anything that they're not used to eating anyway? So are the fish looking up or down? Uh, they're feeding on crawdads, minnows, other stuff on the bottom. You can call them in, drop your jigs to the bottom and snap jig it, bang it on the bottom, jerk it, do anything you can do to get them fish to come in and look at it. You can stink them in. That's where the scents come in. That's where tipping it with sucker meat comes in. All that cool stuff. Does the color matter with power bait? No, I don't think it does. It's just strictly a scent, and you're just rubbing it on. You can get that stuff with glitter. That might help a little bit, but I don't even worry about that. I just get a jar of power bait, stick it in my box, and I just go out with it, and I'll rub it on the tentacles a lot as the day goes on. I'll keep it in my pocket. And if they're feeding on mysis or other fish, we have a big mysis shrimp problem out here in Colorado, and if they get on the shrimp diet, they just won't grow. We caught a tagged fish a while back that was 21 inches long, and it was over 20 years old. 20 years old. It got stuck on the mysis diet and wouldn't transfer to other fish, what never grew. So you got to think about that. Mysis will suspend up in the water column, especially in the winter. What are the other fish? What are the other sizes? In March, there's some kind of minnow that swims down. I think it's lake trout minnows, but they'll be down about 40 or 50 feet on some of the humps that we fish. And if you catch a little fish and you fillet it, its stomach will be full of them. We found that out, and we will drop small tubes down there, and we'll catch a whole bunch of fish. And that's kind of get off of the big fish when that's going on, because it's just fun to catch fish that crazy fast. And then you can switch to, if you're getting into the bigger baits, you can switch to your minnow baits, like your power minnows, your big swim baits. You can switch to them. And if they are feeding on mysis, your tungsten jigs are great options there. And then just your little ice jigs, stuff like that. Then you got to decide whether you want to, if they're feeding on mysis or any other, if they're suspending, you want to drop it down. You never want to drop it below them because lake trout are bottom up feeders. So wherever they're at is the bottom, and they're used to looking up. So never drop it below where you're seeing the fish. And a lot of times, if you are like late in the year when the deeper part of the lakes lose oxygen, you can go to the deepest part of the lake, the deepest holes, and you can turn your graph on and you can see these schools of fish swimming by about 50 feet deep, 60 feet deep, something like that. And you can drop down little jigs and you can just start reeling them up, and then fish will break out of the school and come up and hit them, and it is just absolute fun to do that. So when you're looking at the mysis connection or any other reason they're suspending, always keep that in mind, because that's to me that's a pretty big thing to that you don't want to just ignore. Then techniques, when you're talking about snap jigging, do you have a key for when to reel up on big fish? There's two ways to look at it. One is the minute you see that fish, take it away from them. Just take it away from him and see what happens. Number two, if you get him to come in and look at you and he's diving on you and he's doing what we call the dance, if he's doing that stuff and he's ignoring you, when he starts to swim away, reel up. See if all of a sudden his predatory instincts come in and he comes in and chases you. But the one thing I can say, when you're reeling up, don't stop reeling until you get near your hole. Them fish will shoot up from 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 feet of water to the ice in no time, about as fast as you can reel. They can get there. So they'll wait, and all of a sudden they'll charge up, and we get a lot of fish right at the hole just under the ice from playing that game. Dynamic lures or similar lures work on Lakers. Yeah, all that stuff will work. Anything will work at any given time. You might want to try tipping it with sucker meat. The thing you want to do when you're tipping lures with, especially those vibrating baits, if you're tipping them with sucker meat, you want to make sure you have such a small piece on there that it doesn't affect the action of the lure. Whatever you're doing, do not affect the action of the lure. Those lures are made to do something in the water, and if those fish are liking it, you don't want to change it away. If I'm using something like that, I'm probably not using meat. I'm probably either rubbing power bait on it or I'm using some kind of other scent on it for the smell at that point. If he stops if he stops inverting, he starts tilting down on your bait, that's when I would start. When he starts to ignore you, that's when I would start reeling. So, when it comes to this techniques, the snap jigging, just bang it really hard, rip it up, let it go down, let it do anything crazy you can do. Keep it low in the strike zone. If them fish are coming through on the bottom, you want to keep it close to the bottom. You don't want to be jigging it up 4 and 5 feet high. If them fish are coming through at 50 feet, it's the same thing. Their strike zone can be really small, and you need to respect that. And then dead stick it. If them fish aren't hitting it moving, don't be afraid to hold it dead still. Sometimes they're just super lazy. They're not seeing the nutrient value and trying to fight for a big piece of bait. But the minute you stop it, they'll come and hit it. If you are fishing suspended, ringing the dinner bell, that's where we'll just sit there and we'll just shake the rod real hard, kind of like if you were fishing for bluegill and getting that real good twitch going with your rod, only get it real aggressive. And that'll call in fish suspended from a long time. That drop and reel, we were just talking about it. You can drop it to the bottom and just reel it up and just keep doing that and keep doing that. When I'm doing that, I use more minnow style baits, power minnows, jerk shads, flukes, stuff like that. And just always, whenever you're bringing that stuff up, you always be ready for that bite just underneath the ice. That is so important to pay attention to, because you'll get bit there and you'll just think, oh, that must have been a little one, but that could have been the biggest fish of your day. And then bobbers, when you're fishing bobbers, I mean, if you're fishing kids, you're fishing bait or anything, and you're not moving, you're going to take a break. putting a bobber on your line is awesome. I'll do a video tomorrow, but you basically double up the line and clip the bobber over the hook on the bobber, clip it over that doubled up line. And when you set the hook, the bobber falls off. But take a look at that tomorrow. If you don't understand what I just said, we'll do that video. And if you're fishing with kids or if you're fishing bait, you're not moving around, them bobbers are a great way to catch fish. Is a drop reel only used in a Coke lake? No, definitely not. It is used anywhere you want to get them predatory things going with fish. You can do it in 15 feet of water. You can do it in 10 feet of water. If a fish sees that bait leaving the area, he's probably gonna, yeah, he won't even think about it. He's just gonna run in and eat it. Things to be alert for. You know, our lakes fluctuate so much, and so as the lake drops, that ice will settle along the shoreline, and you'll see a big sheet of ice just kind of angle down. When that happens and it breaks, that ice settles right down on the shoreline, that washes all the minnows, the crawdads, the bugs right out of them rocks, makes it all muddy water, and that just attracts a whole bunch of big fish in that area. Some of our best days is when we absolutely just stumbled into that and we fish shallow, and there it is, big browns, big macs, the whole food chain is there. So if you are out there on the lake and you feel that little earthquake and you look around and say, hey, that just fell right over there, pack up your stuff, run over there and give it 15 minutes. It hurts you not. It could just make your day. I don't know how many times that's paid for us. Then ice heaves, just be safe, cross them carefully. We don't have bad ones up here, but they do separate quite a bit. And then the moon phases, that's two questions I get asked a lot, is moon phases and weather. The full moon for me is a time for extreme. We are going to do extremely good or extremely bad. Whatever, it won't be normal. That's the one thing I have learned about full moons. And weather fronts, when the front is coming in and it's all windy and nasty and all that good stuff, it doesn't seem to help the fishing much. It can hurt it a little bit. But then that bluebird day, the very next day, where it's really cold, maybe a little bit windy, but just brutally cold and sunny out, we can have some good days on there. So I guess that comes down to, if you get the time, go fish. Don't worry about the weather. Don't worry about the moon. You might have a great day if it's a full moon. You might not, but hopefully you'll pick up more about those than I have in the past years. Oh, okay, the Three Lakes contest. This is something I touch on every seminar. They changed some stuff this year, and the weigh station's going to be under the big boat at Indian Peaks Marina. That's that big boat restaurant, and they're going to have a Thursday night kickoff party at Indian Peaks Marina. That's about the only changes they're going to have. So keep that in mind if you're fishing it. I'll be running the weigh station, and stop by and say hi. Any advice on fishing Williams Fork? Williams Fork is getting a lot of pressure now. The kokanee population is dwindling. Gill lice have really hurt that lake. And so you're not going to have all the fish out on them deeper shelves like they always used to be. Don't be afraid to move into them, all them points out there. Don't be afraid to move into there. Right in front of East Boat Ramp Bay, there's a big bench right there. Don't be afraid to fish on top of it. You can't ride machines out there, so you got to pick where you're going. But if you're going to go fish where people have been fishing for years, out on the big ridge or out on that main point over there, pick a spot on your way over there where you can fish shallow. Give that a shot. And with the whole pike thing going on, them big pike will be out there. They will be suspended a lot. And when they suspend, I've caught my biggest ones there in the winter while fishing for lake trout. You see a fish come through 5 or 10, 15 feet below the ice on your graph. Whatever you're using for bait, just reel it up. Reel it up and dead stick it right above where you saw that fish. I can't tell you how many times I've had a big pike turn around and come and hit that. And we've gotten them up to 42, 43 inches. Big fat pike doing that. So try that. If you just want numbers, move off into the deeper water. Fish that 70, 80-foot stuff. And if you could find where a bluff drops down and starts to get flat in that deeper water, that's where I'd really target. Over on the west side's a good spot for that. I might have missed this in the beginning. Talk about bait size to action of the rod. I run a Dave Gens 36-inch medium heavy rod. How big a bait can I get away with on a rod like that? You can get away with any size bait. I stop at about a half ounce, because then your rod, you can't maneuver that bait and you can't make the sharp twitches and the sharp things that you can do. The tip gets a little soft, so it absorbs more of your action than the bait. So I wouldn't go anything over a half ounce on that rod. Have you used a new Lowrance live ice fishing? I have not yet. I've been playing with it in the garage. Like we're just getting underway of ice fishing up here. I'm going out tomorrow, so I will be playing with it tomorrow. Sonny Evans, finally, no kidding, Sonny. Hey, our Lake Trout Mafia, this is something that I believe very passionate about. It's just our way of taking care of the fisheries, handle the fish carefully. If you're out there and it's cold and you see them ice starting to glaze over, get the fish back in the water. You have to be ready if it's cold for that, to get them pitchers ready. Please hold the fish horizontally, grab them by the tail, support their belly. Kneel or sit down. If you drop a fish, it falls a lot less if you're kneeling or sitting down, but don't drop it. And then check with your local biologist. Find out where the biggest group of fish are and pick on those. We need to harvest some fish so we don't get overpopulated at a certain level and then they take all the food away from the big fish. So it is important to harvest some, but it's important to harvest the right ones. And the Lake Trout Mafia is just kind of what it says. A group of guys go fishing. You know, we're lake trout guys. We're not going to tell you nothing. It's none of your business. But we're all gonna adhere to. I want to keep these fish around for our kids. So I don't know. We started a Facebook page of that. It's been kind of fun playing with it over the years. Show us your catches. Put it on put it on Lake Trout Mafia. We'd love to see it. And I guess that's about it, unless I have some more questions here. Oh, here you go. Blue doesn't always freeze everywhere. Any idea where for big fish when the entire lake isn't frozen? You just got to get out there and fish where you can and find that structure. Lake trout don't care what's frozen, what's not. But if they're back in Iola Basin and you find that structure, they're going to be there. They love structure. They love their little couches. Yeah, the webinar will be on YouTube. It's going to be on Navionics YouTube site. And I'm going to ask them if I can get it on mine. I don't know if they'll let it, but I know it'll be on Navionics YouTube site. Hey, David, thanks for the kind words. Should we black out our fish pictures? You do what you want with your fish pictures. I don't like the blacked out look. We always just kneel down and take a picture with the snow in the background of the lake. I guess you can call that a white out or a blue out, but it looks a lot better than a blackout. Unless you're fishing at night, of course. Hey guys, thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate it. If you want me to do any videos of anything, if you want any tips, you want me to bring up anything in seminars, shoot me a text, get a hold of me on Facebook, or email me, do whatever you want to do. I'll try to get any information you guys want. I'll do my best to get it to you. Thanks a lot for watching. Really appreciate it.